This week, we speak with Nicolas Valcárcel from AdRoll. In the news segment, an attack skims card details from log files, CWE updates their top errors, BSIM gets 3 new activities, and more. Stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production. False positives suck. With so many mobile apps to test, how much time will you waste on false positives? Eliminate them today with NowSecure. Only NowSecure automates static, dynamic, and interactive testing on real Android and iOS devices. Now you get speed, accuracy, and efficiency for DevOps, plus the broadest coverage of security, compliance, and privacy issues. Why waste time on false positives? Visit securityweekly.com/NowSecure to learn how to scale your mobile AppSec testing with NowSecure. Signal Sciences secures the most important web applications, APIs, and microservices of the world's leading companies, protecting over 7,500 applications and 150 billion production requests per week. Signal Sciences Next-Gen WAF and RASP help companies increase security and maintain site reliability without sacrificing velocity, all at the lowest total cost of ownership. Signal Sciences' patented technology protects any application against any attack, with integrations into any DevOps toolchain. Signal Sciences, demand more from your WAF. Learn more at signalsciences.com/PSW.
Welcome to Application Security Weekly. This is episode 77, recorded September 23rd, 2019. I'm your host, Mike Shima. I'm here with Matt Alderman. Hey, Matt.
Good morning. Nice little chilly day in Colorado.
And we've also got John Kinsella. John, hopefully you're not having quite as a chilly morning so far.
It's sunny California, a little bit of fog. Another Monday with Application Security Weekly jingle stuck in my head.
We'll see how long we can keep that in there and add some more. We do have exciting news about the Security Weekly webcast program. We are now partnered with IC2 as an official CPE provider. If you attend any of our webcasts, you will be receiving 1 CPE credit per webcast. Register for one of our upcoming webcasts with, and it's a long list here, Tom Stitt of ExtraHop, or Mohul Ravankar of SaltStack, or Steve Lovenstein of Core Security, or Bryce Schroeder of ServiceNow, or all of them, by going to securityweekly.com/webcasts. If you have missed any of our previously recorded webcasts, you can find our on-demand library at securityweekly.com/on-demand. Security Weekly will be at Hacker Halted in Atlanta, Georgia this October 10th and 11th. If you are attending and would like to sponsor an interview, please submit your interest on our conference request form at securityweekly.com/booking. EC Council is offering our listeners a $100 discount to attend the 2-day conference. Use discount code HH19SW when you register, or go to securityweekly.com/hackerhalted and register there. Nicolas is a security engineer at AdRoll. He has over a decade of experience working in the technology industry, including various development, operations, and security roles. Nicolas has been involved in multiple early-stage startups and has helped them build the foundation for their engineering teams, as well as successfully design, bootstrap, and build security programs. Hi, Nicolas. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for having me here.
Well, you had a 2-sentence tag here to sort of describe why we're chatting with you. It's about, and it goes as, developers and security professionals have vastly different views of the world. So it's not uncommon that trainings created by the latter don't fully reach the former. And so that's, I think, a pretty important theme right there, just to say, let's actually bring training to make it relevant for developers. And I think there's some stuff for us that you wanted to talk about, but also it sounds like you actually have a background as a developer. So you're coming from, a point of direct experience here. Could you talk a little bit about, what brought you into security?
Yeah. So actually, funny story. It's more of like a coming back and forward. I'm somewhat the stereotypical product of Hollywood. When I was 15, I was fascinated with Hollywood movies and hacking. and I wanted to do that, like a hoodie on the basement, black screen, green font, and whatnot. So I actually started my career as a security engineer on Canonical. It was my first job out of college. And one thing I realized is that what I wanted to focus on or what I wanted to do, I actually had to learn more how the applications actually work on the inside, and I didn't have that knowledge. So I made the conscious decision of, after that job, going seek for a development job and get the developer experience and actually writing code and spending time with developers and and learning all the intricacies of like how applications connect to databases, how do you actually write the queries, like and like all the in and outs on how programs actually work. And then once I got this knowledge, the opportunity just came. This experience, sorry, the opportunity came to me to go back to security, and now I'm back in security. Try of kind of like using all the knowledge I gained while doing development.
That's pretty. Was there one thing in particular that going back to on the development aspect and build and coding that gave you more appreciation for either security specifically or just recognizing why developer training for security or security training for developers didn't really seem to be working well or didn't seem to really be effective?
Yeah, so my reading of the situation is that developers they work with code all the time. They write programs that they have to maintain. There is like a whole life cycle that goes from when somebody got an idea. A product manager gets an idea. They do some vetting with the market of the idea, getting everything documented. Hopefully, everything documented and getting ready for the developers to work on. And then the developers have to understand that, getting that to work, pushing the code, then going on fixing bugs, and then at some point maybe sunsetting the feature and getting out of production because it's no longer relevant or needs to be changed for something else. So there is this whole life cycle that can go over years. While most on the security industry, we don't usually go through that much. We usually build small tools or small scripts that are very short-lived. So the philosophy that goes into writing those are vastly different, and you need to think about them very, very different because, if I just want to do a dirty hack or something that I need to do for one engagement, I can do as crappy code as I want to do because I don't have to maintain it or fix it later. I don't have to go back and change stuff. One thing that developers, for example, often go to is that they go and write an application. They need to do a simple query to retrieve something, and they need to do, some nested queries because you need to get the users, and then from the users, what are their products, and then what are the offers they have available. So you have these very, very nested queries, which at the beginning work fine, but once your database grows massively, then the query is not going to be as fast, and you need to do a lot of performance tweaking for that query to be successful. And that, for example, is I think the golden example that I usually give is that we cannot go as security professionals and just tell developers you just need to use the ORM and then you don't need to worry about SQL injections. Because on one hand, that's extremely true. If you go and do the ORM, that's going to be, most of the security SQL injections go out of the window. But then on the other hand, when you get to a scale where you need to actually build more performant SQL queries in your database, you actually need to write SQL, raw SQL on your application. Because if not, the +1 queries that you're going to get are going to be unmanageable, and your applications are going to start to time out. So we need to actually teach the developers how to write SQL, like raw SQL as well, and try to teach them like when you need to go to these particular situations. This is the way it should be done. This is the way you need to be thinking about your application and be there to help them. Because it's not as easy as just use the ORM, because they're just going to ignore that when the performance of their application is just not there with the ORM.
And I think the other challenge you kind of raised a little bit, Nicolas, was applications change, right? There's a life cycle. And sometimes as security professionals, we think about the initial app that comes out, and we, at the end of the process, we test it and we say, okay, it's ready to go, and out it goes out and into production. But then there's this life cycle of change and change management and all the other things that are there. And sometimes security may or may not understand aspects of that change as it's going through its life cycle of better performance and all the other changes that need to happen. And I think that's the other big disconnect here, is because we don't understand from a security perspective the life cycle of an application. I also think it's hard for security to really help educate developers on the things they should be looking for as they're making changes, because we see it as kind of this big project at the end.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's entirely true. There is so many stuff that goes into developing a long-lived application that we just don't understand, and there are so many points that we need to get into, and that we need to know how to talk to the developers of like, okay, so you have these, you come with this idea. This idea seems decent. It has no security implications. It's fine. Then it goes off. Some users, some customers and whatever use it, then there is a slight change because the product managements learn about the usage and what they're doing. So they make a slight change. And now this slight change introduces a very big risk or vulnerability into it. And we're not there to look into that because, it's just a small change. Now we just added one input. Like we change a Dropbox for an actually text box input. For us, that changes the world. For them, it's just like one simple change in one form. And yes, as you said, there is a disconnect there as well.
That's a really good point, because I think one of the things you were also kind of describing with the ORM and SQL injection is that training a lot of times can be, this is the way to do it, this is the right way, any other way than this is wrong. And what you're just describing just now is that there's, drift happens within engineering. Code, changes all the time. And it could be lots of little changes are starting to accrue that may weaken things. Or there may be legitimate reasons due to performance or other engineering trade-offs where the quote unquote doing the right thing from the security training perspective actually may not even be the right thing, or maybe it's right in a ideal world, but in reality, there has to be some middle ground. So I'm kind of curious, what have you done to try to approach that when you talk to teams, or when you try to bring them to security training and, more importantly, secure programming training? How do you try to reach that middle ground with them?
Yeah, so I actually like how I came to be here, and I think that's also kind of important to do it. I actually have created this open source secure coding training. I'm terrible with names, so I literally just name it secure coding with Python. It's on my GitHub. It's a training that anybody can go and look at it. It's open source. You can add to it if you want and whatnot. So the way I'm doing this, and that's also another learning I got from my years doing development, is like when you get any programming book or any programming training, what usually happens is there is like a huge storytelling and a storyline across the book. You start building an application and you start with the first concepts. Then in the next chapter, you get what you did in chapter 1, and then you add some more to it, and then there is some new lessons there. And then on chapter 3, you get what you did on chapter 2, and keep building on top of. And there is also adding more to what you already have. And what I have found when I was trying to look for security training, security coding training, what's available out there, what I mostly found was like there is a lot of code snippets. So there is like this small snippet where you're making the call to the database, and you need to use an ORM instead of doing the SQL or just passing that. But there is no storytelling. There is no context. I got a lot of feedback from developers all the time where they were saying like, so I understand what is happening here. I understand the snippet. I understand the change. But there are these 3 or 4 situations where this change might not be true, and I cannot assess if it's actually accurate or not because I don't understand the context of the application. Like, what is this feature doing? So you have this big form that is getting you're getting input into the database. It comes from a form. Where is that form actually from where this data is coming, who is inputting the data, where are you getting these, where is it going. And in most security trainings, we only have like the snippets, like the really like down to the point snippets instead of the whole context. So kind of with this course, what I have done is I'm kind of building a marketplace application. It's terribly ugly, is pretty much non-functional. It's lacking a lot of functionality, but it's this storytelling of we're going to build an application. So for example, on chapter 1, we just bootstrap the code. Here is where we install our framework and we create the structure of the files. And while doing that, because we copy a requirements.txt file, we got like a terribly outdated framework version, and it has some vulnerability. That's lesson number 1. Just like check your library versions. Then we go on chapter 2, which is actually SQL injection. We build the first form, and we do the worst way of doing it, which is just concatenate the string and pass it to the database, which is like the textbook definition of SQL injection. And then we do that. Then we do a fix, which is far from ideal, which is what is typical for, or I have seen people think is the best way to do it, is just like escape strings, escape quotes. So you do the escaping by hand, and then on chapter 2 there is the fix for that. The test for that is just like escaping the quote, and then it gets passed again, and then there is another fix and another fix on top of that. So through the course or through the training, you will see a lot of like, here is some code. This is the feature we built. This is a vulnerability. This is one way to fix it, which is probably wrong. There is another test for that. Then there is another fix, and so on and so forth. So the developer can actually see all the trade-off they could make, all the errors they could make, and not only this is the right way to do it, but this is all the wrong ways that you can actually also do this, and this is why they don't work.
And by starting with a sample application, what you're trying to do is provide all that context around the actual application so they understand, oh yeah, I implemented that form, I did it wrong, here's a couple of iterations of how to fix it. And so it makes it very relevant in an actual, even though it may not be a fully functional application, an application versus what you said before, a code snippet, which is, it's hard to understand context sometimes of the code snippet when you don't have the rest of the application together.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so right now the training is still in MVP phase. I just finished it 1 week ago or 2 weeks ago. So it still needs a lot of more flesh to it. But what I have done is, when we start, this is the description. This is the business thing that we need to get going. This is the requirement, kind of what product brings us to the table. The user stories and whatnot. This is the development, kind of the technical spec of what we're trying to get to, and now here is the vulnerability and why we did wrong. But yes, correctly, I'm providing the whole context of like, this is all we built it. This is the reason this is here. This is why we have this functionality. This is how we made this mistake. And sometimes I also add some stories from the trenches where like, oh, this is the reason we did this. So why would we start with a requirement.txt where the library, the framework is outdated if we're just starting up? Well, that happens because you copied and pasted a requirement.txt from another project that you worked on like years ago, and that happens. So I have not, instead of doing the shaming of like, this is a mistake, it happened, is most of like, oh, because of this reason, we ended up in this situation as well, which is super common to happen, or at least that I have seen happen, or that have happened to me in the past.
Well, Paul does this all the time with our internal application. If he needs functionality in Python, he goes out and looks for a library, and then he has to go figure out the library and probably fix it and make it fit into our code and secure. But it's commonplace, right? You're trying to perform a function. You go out and you look up to see if anybody's done it before. You grab that code, you bring it over, and you reuse it in some form or fashion. It may be vulnerable when you brought it over because it's, it could be a couple years old, but it's the only thing you could find that gets you close enough to actually implementing that functionality in your application.
Yeah, and if you do development like for a living, most of the time, you don't even need to go and look outside. It's like, oh, I fixed this in a project like 5 years ago. So I'm just going to go open the code that I still have on one of my backups and copy and paste that code into my new application. So it's still code that is 5, 10 years old. It's just that it's not that somebody else wrote it. I wrote it. Like, and at that time it was still vulnerable and whatever, and new findings have come, or new technologies came to life from there and whatnot. So yeah, there is this lot of ways where this stuff can happen, and it's not because developers aren't doing the right thing. It's just natural. It's natural human beings. That's just like regular stuff that happens. So what I also try to do is this, like, this could happen to you, this happened to me, and that's kind of like how the social engineering industry is doing, and I kind of copy that from them. It's like, I guess the human hacker Chris Nagy, he always says, like, I have been fished. I do this for a living. I fish people for a living, and I still have been fished. I still make these mistakes. It's not that you're a fool, is that this just happens. And I think the same concept needs to go into application security training, or we need to go out and say, like, we're all vulnerable. It's not that you're stupid or you don't know things. It's just that this happens, and happens to all of us.
Yeah, the joke I used to make with my architect when I was doing a couple startups is, it's just Control-C, Control-V, right? You copy that code,
Yep.
You paste it over here, you make a few changes, and you're done, right? It's that simple.
Yep.
And he would always look at me cross-eyed like, yeah, it's more than that. But to your point, that developers will grab previously used code to solve a new problem with it, and that's how this stuff happens.
Yeah, it's actually like, have anybody ever seen the homepage of Stack Overflow? Like, nobody does that. They just go to Google, search something, you get into a post, copy and paste the code. Like, we all use Stack Overflow all the time. Have you ever seen the homepage of it? Like, probably not. So yeah, that happens all the time, and it's more common than not.
I was wearing my copy and paste from Stack Overflow t-shirt last week. I wish I had it on today. So Nicolas, let me ask you, this is, you're covering a lot of the AppSec training in some different areas. You've talked about hygiene, you've talked about sample code and getting people to learn through doing. Who do you see as a target for this? Do you look at this more for, you talked about professional coders. Are you seeing them more, the pros coming back and using this either for a refresher or to learn in the first place? Or do you see any traction at like college or people learning a little bit earlier in their careers? Any sort of, what have you seen around that?
So the way I brought this training, and the reason I put it as open source, and the way I structure is that it could be any, and I structure in a way that it could also be a reference, and you can actually go and just like specifically go to the chapter on SQL injections because you needed a refresher, and you can actually go on the bad fixes for SQL injection as a refresher and whatnot. I'm actually doing a very, very weird use of Git branches, and pretty much every chapter is a Git branch. So you can navigate through the branches, and you can actually have the pull request with all the beef from previous chapter to new chapter, so you get the context and everything that has changed. You can even download that to your IDE and follow it on your IDE, because you just need to move branches and you get more stuff. Now, when you download it, it's a little weird right now because it was the MVP. I didn't use Docker for anything, so you need to actually set up databases and whatnot. But I'm working on that. It's halfway done. It's going to be available soon. But I think everybody will benefit from this. I think it will also be a dual. So kind of where I'm more comfortable with, and what I want to do in my place in the security space is building bridges between developers and the security team, and that goes both ways. That's both training developers on how to do secure things and training security people on development and the trade that they have to make. So I think this training could be used both by engineers trying to learn security and security people trying to learn how development actually works, because you get both the development and the security portions. So even security engineers with a lot of experience, they know completely how an SQL injection works, and they know how to exploit it and whatnot. They could benefit of knowing how this SQL injection even came to be in the first place.
Idea that just popped into my head, something I've had difficulty with in the past, is getting open source projects to improve their AppSec. it'd be sort of neat maybe to see if you could get some sort of traction with other open source projects using this to be able to improve their own software. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, that would be great. So I guess for the next steps, one things I want to do is getting under the OWASP wing and try to get the project there, trying to get more content and trying to support the structure to different languages. And of course, get more. I just got, I think, 9 chapters with a bunch of sub-chapters. Yeah, so 9 topics, nine family of vulnerabilities. In there, I want to add more as well. But yeah, the idea of this being open source is exactly that. Like, get it to as many people as we can, so they can do it. Like, even inside the companies, you can just download it and use it as a tool, like as a lab for training your developers, and actually drive these conversations, because now you have this thing that you can show, and this is the course, and we can get there. Here is all the information. Now, if you have any questions, I'm here to answer any questions you have, and then you can actually use it as materials for providing your training and driving these conversations inside your companies. So hopefully it can be of use of multiple from multiple angles.
Yeah, I think the other interesting potential persona for this training, as I was thinking through this, not only the security folks, but think about the product management folks, the people that are building the requirements. If they understood aspects of these different nuances on how it gets coded, maybe they could define the requirements a little better to actually help prevent some of these common mistakes that lead to security vulnerabilities. So I thought product management might be a good audience to get a refresher on what's secure and what's not secure from a coding perspective.
Yeah, I didn't added that or thought about that, but probably, hopefully, it's beneficial for them as well. I will be super happy and stoked, or be super happy to add more content on that, like targeting those as well.
I just connected some dots together, and I realized you gave me a preview of this 2 months ago. I was used to seeing your GitHub and your Twitter handle, not your actual name. So I've looked at this. Actually pretty cool.
Yeah. So funny. I'm a regular listener to the show, and a couple of months ago, in the podcast, you mentioned like, oh, it would be cool if we have more resources for training developers and whatnot. Like, if somebody is doing something on the line, please reach out. And I was like, I'm actually working on that. And at that stage, I'm not sure if you can see it, but around here there are a lot of post-its. That was at that time. So it was still an idea phase, and it like post-its on my wall on how to structure. So yeah, I reached out to, I think, the 3 of you to tell them about this idea I was having and I was going to work on, until it was like way more fleshed out, and I actually had something to show. And now we're here. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's really cool to have that to show, because you've gone beyond just, oh, here's an idea, something should exist, to actually, grabbing that open source mentality and building it up for the community. I think one of the other things that really appealed to me about this is that throughout this whole conversation so far, no one has mentioned a particular top 10 list of web security. And I think that's a good thing, and I'm going to try to avoid naming it, mostly because how this training has been described and how this approach has been described, it's really been centered on how do we build an application, what could go wrong, and what are some of the better ways to address those types of vulnerabilities or weaknesses that come up. And that even ties into when Matt was saying, hey, product managers might benefit from this as well, so they can have a good appreciation of not only how what do developers do in their spare time between Control-C and Control-V, but what kind of vulnerabilities come up when security teams come around with their vuln scanners or their their source analysis scanners and say, oops, we found this vulnerability, we need to go fix this. So that was another thing I just wanted to highlight as part of this approach, and how this is how the narrative here is set up to say, let's build a program, but let's also show how it can be done securely, as well as what some of the traps are when it is insecure.
Yeah, no, as you mentioned, right? It has been, the top 10 list was in my mind when I was building this, but the main driver was the narrative of building the application. I was trying to cover most of the common stuff, and also some stuff that I have seen in the past that are sort of annoying, or I have seen that could be easily avoided. But it was mostly like the way I was thinking of it is like, okay, so what is the first thing I need to do to start an application? Okay, so what security vulnerability can I show there? Okay, what is my next step as a developer to build the application? Okay, I need to do this. What vulnerability can I add here, and so on and so forth. And I even made those decisions. I even changed it a little bit, the narrative of the application building, to get more out of the steps. So, for example, usually when you start an application and you need something authenticated, the first thing you do is the login form. In this building, I actually built an authenticated form, or a form that should be authenticated first without authentication, just to show the connection to the database and the SQL injection and whatnot, without worrying about authentication first, and then do the authentication. Because on the authentication part, I want to show more of like, sure, you do the authentication, you authenticate the person, and now this authenticated person can do lateral movement and access, Matt's stuff instead of my stuff with my credentials, kind of situation. So I also changed the narrative around that. But yes, the whole training is centered about narrative and not about a particular list, although the list has been taken into consideration when building this, so it can be covered.
Yeah, and I think that ties back to what you were saying. You mentioned in the beginning, making training relevant, making it useful to developers,
and fun.
Look, and fun. That, yes, also a very important point. So this one, you said with your under your naming scheme, this was secure coding with Python. Do I just have to be a Python developer to understand some of the security principles? And I guess conversely, what other languages besides Python do you have some ideas for?
Yeah, so there are different ways to consume this. As I said, you can just go to GitHub and just browse the code, because it's different branches. You will find a next section link, and you can go to the next section and you can just read the things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's while I show some of the code in there, is like I do like very, very on to the point snippets in there. So you don't actually have to be a developer in any particular language to understand that. Although there are some tools that are language specific, like, for scanning libraries, like vulnerable libraries, there is like one specific to Python. There will be another specific to Go, and there will be another specific for JavaScript or Java and whatnot. Those are very language specific. But you can still get like a gist of the whole course just by browsing it and reading the text. Because, like, an SQL injection is an SQL injection in Java and Go and in Python. It's probably the same. It's going to be pretty much the same technique. I don't think I have added anything language specific. Although there are some vulnerabilities that are a little different between, even in the same language, between different libraries, depending on if you use Django or you use Flask or you use, Pyramid or whatever framework you decide to use. It will be a bit different, but I don't think there is. I try to make it as language agnostic as possible, and mainly because when I do, say, the Golang one, I want to just copy paste as much as I can, and I don't want to worry about building the whole thing from the ground up.
Spoken like a true developer. Well done.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Control
exactly
C, Control V.
Yeah, that's literally the whole idea. So yeah, hopefully you don't need to be a Python developer to do it, and you can use the thing to do training in Java and then show it. Like if you're doing inside your company and you're a Java shop, you can still show the lab here and then do the parallels to Java and how that will work on Java rather than in Python. And hopefully the information is still there and still relevant.
Cool. I think you mentioned briefly, and I realize our listeners won't be able to see this, but you have some Post-its probably hanging up on the wall that were some inspiration. But I think you also have some other things hanging up on the wall there too. Some surfboards, right?
Oh, yeah. My surfboards are right here. And then you can see the Post-its behind the surfboards.
Perfect. So I wanted to highlight that because I think you mentioned in the beginning being inspired by Hollywood, but I'm pretty sure that especially for all the Point Break fans out there, it sounds like you're inspired equally by Johnny Mnemonic as much as you are Johnny Utah. So what's the best next steps for people to do? Should they start sending you pull requests with additional chapters, with additional language features? What would you like to see as part of the community?
Yeah, so right now, what I will really like, and the next thing I really want to focus on is to get some people to proofread the course, because a lot of stuff makes sense on my mind, but I'm not sure that it will make sense for everybody. Now, pull request, because of the way I'm using GitHub, it's probably going to be a little hard. If somebody finds a way to do it, I will be like extremely pleased to get it done. But there is GitHub issues, so just try to do it. It's going to be a little harder for me to do it. Also, each branch has its own pull request, so probably on the same pull request, you can suggest changes, and I can add it there. I'm still trying to figure that out, how the collaboration is going to be, but the most important thing at this point, because it's just an MVP, is to get people to read it and actually see if it makes sense and what needs to be added, and what stuff haven't I explained in detail and needs a little more deeper explanation. Yeah, and then to the future, after we get these, one thing I will really love to have is some way of, a remediate the flag kind of tool, where you can actually get your team to do kind of like a capture the flag event, where instead of finding the vulnerabilities, it's like, here is a vulnerable application, go and fix them. And you will have like a test, a CI/CD pipeline where you upload your code and it's going to spit out like, this is how many vulnerabilities we found. And then you can start like fixing them and pushing and trying to get the number as lower as possible. So that's another thing I would really love to see. So if somebody wants to build that for me, that will be extremely helpful. I'm just throwing the idea out there, and I hope the open source community responds. If not, I will have to build it myself at some point, I guess.
That's cool. Well, we have of course, October is the cybersecurity month, and everyone's going to be running capture the flags. So it would actually be really cool to see an uptake, as you're describing, that more defense/blue team oriented, like remediate the flags. So I'm pretty sure you'll get asking developers for their opinions. I'm pretty sure you'll get a lot of feedback, and so that's always good. So hopefully those GitHub issues start popping up with some good feedback on the content, and you start as well getting some more pull requests of people helping.
Yeah. It's not like developers are opinionated or anything, right?
No. Well, I want to say thank you again, Nicolas, for joining us and talking through, as a listener yourself, talking through an idea and starting to bring it now into fruition. So hopefully some other listeners out there will come and join you.
Yeah. Hopefully that will be great. You can find the training at GitHub/nxpl/secure-coding-with-Python. That's where you can find me. Also Twitter at nxpl. You can find me in there as well. I'm going to use this training and actually give it online on, I think it's November. There is a lot of all the information is on my Twitter account. So if you are interested in actually taking the course with me, giving it, feel free to do that as well. So yeah, any way to contact me or providing any feedback, I will be extremely pleased, so we can get this as a community effort rather than just me on my room and my post-its on the wall building this thing.
That's awesome. We'll have the links in the show notes as well, so come check out the wiki for the show, and you can find that link, and you can then go track down and help out Nicolas. Want to thank Matt and John as well. Thank everyone for listening. We're going to take a quick break now, and we're going to return with news of the week. Thanks, everyone.